After becoming the offensive coordinator for Kent State, my first college job, I would help coach a top 10 offense that would go on to have its second 11-win season in school history, beating a talented Florida State team in a bowl game. But after getting offered the offensive coordinator job by my alma mater, Stanford, I just couldn't turn the opportunity down. And the first game of the season, we were taking on Temple, so this should have been a tune-up game. And the biggest thing I was trying to figure out this first game was what type of weapons did we have on offense? Because at Kent State, I had one of the best running backs in the country, but Stanford had Emmitt Smith's son and a much better quarterback than Colin Schley, so I figured he'd be able to facilitate this offense well. Everything was going according to plan in the first half, but by the time the second half came around, what was supposed to be a tune-up game turned into a 17-17 battle in the third quarter. But Tanner McKee would find wide receiver Silas Starr for a huge completion that would put us back up and in control of this game again. After I drew up a halfback screen for our offense, Tanner McKee went off script and found Humphries, his favorite receiver, instead. I was a little bit mad that he didn't really listen to me there, but I had to learn to give some control over to my quarterback. After getting stuffed at the goal line, we had to settle for a field goal to go up by 10, and Temple would take advantage, scoring a touchdown to cut the lead back down to 3. Thankfully, E.J. Smith, our consistent running back, would be able to run the clock out, and I started my Stanford career 1-0. Things would quickly turn for the worst in week 2 against Washington as we had to travel to them. E.J. Smith would get hurt on the very first play of the game, and Washington was going to look to take advantage of that as they went up 7-0 in the first quarter. We really needed to convert this 3rd and 20 to give our team a little bit of hope, but the Washington defender played it perfectly, and they would take advantage again, going up 2 touchdowns now. But as the half was coming to a close, Tanner McKee would find Andrew Wilson, the true freshman receiver, all the way down the field to set us up for this Bryce Farrell touchdown as he caught it over the middle and took it up for the touchdown. But both our first and second string running backs were out for the rest of the game, and we had to lean on Brandon Barrows, who somehow was finding the most daylight out of any back we've had this season. He would take this handoff down 21-7 and avoided the defenders like O.J. Simpson avoided jail time. But I wish that we had the juice man in this game, because Tanner McKee would make his first mistake, a costly interception that would get taken back all the way, and we just didn't have enough juice to mount a comeback. After an unfortunate loss in week 2 to Washington, we were finally back at home, and our offense needed a spark from someone. So this big time catch by Bryce Farrell to set us up for the E.J. Smith touchdown was huge. But man, oh man, Tanner McKee was giving the ball away to the defense every week, and I was starting to think his name was Paul Crew because he might have been fixing these games. Washington State obviously took advantage as they'd score the go-ahead touchdown, but McKee restored faith in me as he'd connect with Ben Urasek to put us back up. But this was a back and forth game, and we couldn't get comfortable. Washington State took the lead, and they were up by 14 in the fourth quarter. That's when I dialed up a go ball to Humphries, who would catch it and bring us all the way down to the 1. But unfortunately, after scoring, our defense wouldn't be able to get the ball back. After losing 2 straight games, we had to take on the number 3 team in the country. And you know this game started off terribly. After scoring this touchdown in the first quarter, Utah would end up going up 14-3. But just before the half, with less than 10 seconds left, Tanner McKee would find Ben Urasek for the huge completion, and he'd be able to break a tackle and get us inside the 20-yard line to kick this field goal just before the break. But Utah just kept pulling away, and they were up by 15 before we found Bryce Farrell for the touchdown. And I just had to show y'all this hit because my boy Silas Starr got murdered, which put us in a 4th and 4. But my man would get his lick back and convert the 4th down, which was huge in such a close game like this one. And after that touchdown to Humphries, we'd go right back to him for the 2-pointer, which sent this game to overtime. And after our defense had an incredible stop on this 3rd and 6, Utah was forced to kick a field goal, and we'd be able to drive down the 25 yards and punch it in from 1 yard out. Our turnover troubles continued in this game against Oregon State, as E.J. Smith would fumble it on our first possession, and Oregon State would capitalize. But our offense was resilient, and we'd be able to drive down the length of the field. And on a 3rd down, McKee wouldn't take no for an answer, as he'd run it in himself and dive for the touchdown. With less than 30 seconds left to go in the half, we were still down by 7, but this pass to E.J. Smith was set us up to give him the ball on the very next play to score it and tie it up. Our offense would struggle significantly from then on, as we couldn't get anything going on the ground game, and McKee would throw an interception when we needed him most. But with just over a minute left, we were able to put a little something together and get just within field goal range to finally put this game away. It was Party Nation versus Nerd Nation in this matchup between Arizona State and Stanford. After coaching us to a close top 25 win last week, I was looking to build upon that with our offense. but we were struggling to get much going until Tanner McKee found his receiver Wilson just before the half to give us a field goal lead. And maybe, just maybe, Arizona State shouldn't have been partying so much, because when they tried to tackle my dog E.J. Smith, he ran 3 of them over, and the 4th one just barely got him out of bounds. We fed his hungry ass all the way into the end zone, and our defense was doing a great job of getting pressure on the quarterback and getting the ball back into our hands. But this was a critical 3rd and 10 in the 4th quarter. And thankfully Bryce Farrell was able to convert it. And a few plays later, we'd run a tunnel screen to Humphries to get us even closer. And then on another big time 3rd and 10, Tanner McKee would find his favorite receiver Humphries again, this time for the score. That would put the game away as we were getting ready for a big time matchup. Man, I couldn't wait to take on the sorry ass Leprechauns of Notre Dame. And even though they jumped out to a 7-0 lead on us, I wasn't too worried. Man, I'm telling you, we were ready to spank these. Okay. Alright, never mind. Maybe I'm a little bit worried after that interception. After going down 14-0, we were starting to make a little bit of a comeback, and Humphries would have the craziest run after catch on this bubble, which would help set up this Silas Star touchdown just before the half to tie it up. And after this E.J. Smith touchdown in the 3rd quarter, I felt a little bit more confident to talk shit again. But I needed our defense to get a stop on this 3rd and 20, and that's what they'd be able to do. That means it was all on us, the offense, to try and run the clock out. And E.J. Smith was able to get it done as the ugly-ass Leprechaun threw his hands up in disbelief. Oregon's one of the most talented teams in the country. And you know Tanner McKee's bread and butter is throwing the ball to the other team. And Oregon was treating this game like Olive Garden. Unlimited breadsticks. Or maybe Bertucci's. I don't know, he just threw the ball to the other team a lot. But amazingly, our defense was holding it down, and we'd only give up 3 points because of those turnovers up to this point. And we were getting some of our lesser known options involved. But our defense couldn't help us on this play, because after we threw this interception, the defender would just take it back to the house. And in the 3rd quarter, this would be Tanner's 4th interception of the game, but thankfully some good came out of it as our defense would force a safety. So we still had a chance in this one. That wasn't until Justin Flo intercepted it and took it to the house for Tanner's 5th interception of the game, but we couldn't hang our heads for too long because we had another top 12 opponent. And UCLA came out in this game swinging. They would score on offense, and then on defense, Bryce Farrell would catch this ball over the middle and get decapitated. But we wouldn't be discouraged because it set us up for this Ben Urasek touchdown, which would help cut the lead just before the end of the 1st quarter. After McKee shook off this sack, Bryce Farrell must have shook off his CTE from earlier, as he would catch it and break the tackle for the touchdown to give us the lead. Our offense had all the momentum at this point, and McKee was looking for Farrell as he would roll right and throw it across his body to him. And after I ripped into McKee for that Oregon game, he was making some of the best throws of his life, as he would throw an absolute dime for the touchdown to extend our lead, and would continue throwing dimes, which would help set up this field goal. We were riding an 11-point lead into the 4th quarter comfortably, and McKee would run this read option to perfection, as he would have the bounce back game of bounce back games. We were finally ranked number 23 in the country when USC came to town, and Bryce Farrell was continuing his hot streak from last week, as he would score the first touchdown of the game. Our 2nd-string running back Casey Filkins was finally getting some running room, as he set us up in USC territory, but the defensive lineman had a 50-inch vertical, and we somehow found ourselves down 21-7. But we weren't out of it yet, because McKee's new favorite target, Bryce Farrell, had one of the most impressive plays of the season, breaking multiple defenders on his way to scoring the touchdown. In the 4th quarter, we were down by 16. That wasn't until true freshman Andrew Wilson got the ball in his hands and he'd run a USC defender over to score. Down just 10 now, Humphries would get in on the action, catching the hitch and making the defender miss, going all the way. We'd be able to kick a field goal to force overtime, but Caleb Williams would find his running back over the middle and he'd be able to score. We'd answer right back to the true freshman, but after we had to settle for a field goal in the 2nd overtime, Caleb Williams would find his receiver Mario Williams and he'd take it the distance, ending our hopes of a masterful comeback. We had one of the best true freshman receivers in the country, because after scoring 2 touchdowns against USC last week, Andrew Wilson continued to show what he was about. And of course, Tanner McKee continued to show what he was about as well. And you know he was about his interceptions. I feel like he just wanted to make these games closer than they had to be. But he'd be able to thread the needle on this one to Ben Urasek, his tight end, and would throw an absolutely beautiful ball to Silas Star in the hole shot between the safety and the corner. We'd finally get our running back E.J. Smith involved, as we'd give him a sweep and he'd be able to just outrun the defenders. But we only found ourselves up 16-10 as the defense was having trouble stopping them, and Cal would eventually take the lead. That was until our stud true freshman receiver would catch this ball to reclaim it. And for the 2-point conversion, I drew up a beautiful play for Bryce Farrell, as he'd be able to sit in the middle of the zone. We needed to convert this 3rd and 4 to run out the clock, and that's exactly what we would do is we would find Humphreys, and thankfully we would take the axe back home where it belonged. We were facing the #1 rushing offense in the country in Army, but our defense was doing a really good job of holding them once they got down to the goal line. That wasn't until they scored this touchdown. I mean, I truthfully wouldn't be able to live with myself if we lost to a service school. So I told my offense, if we don't produce, I will physically drag each and every one of you into the Army, and your ass might end up in a war you're not supposed to be fighting. I think they got the message, as this touchdown would be just enough to extend our lead and help avoid the upset. I could not believe that our bowl game was against a team that I had just coached last season, Kent State, and I had to watch my favorite player, Marquez Cooper, shit on me. Kent State was 9-3 without me, so it looked like they really didn't even need me. But it was honestly a relief seeing Colin Schley throw an interception, so I knew it wasn't just my offense. Just before the half, we found ourselves tied 10-10 before McKee would find Bryce Farrell over the middle that would lead to a field goal. But this costly interception in the second half would put Kent State into scoring position, and they'd be able to run this jet sweep all the way in for the touchdown and the lead. And I knew our offense had to step it up, so we just kept feeding EJ Smith as he'd be able to put his head down and get into the end zone. But after Kent State was able to kick a field goal to force it to overtime and score a touchdown in the first OT, we needed to answer, and EJ Smith was just the guy for the occasion. We got held to a field goal in the second OT, and the defense made a great stop to force it to a third OT. But we went for it all on this 4th and 1 and weren't able to convert, as I'd lose to my former team and finish the season 8-5. For as much trash as I talked about Tanner McKee, he had a solid 3,300 yard season with 25 touchdowns, and the entirety of the offense was looking good. And even though I was getting a bunch of offensive coordinator opportunities, as well as a head coaching gig, I knew that I was going to come back to Stanford next season. We had unfinished business. If you got this far, I'd really appreciate if you subscribe. Appreciate y'all.